computer.
Thanks, Angie, and thanks for that little introduction and that visualization. Lovely. And I'd love to continue seeing your wonderful bright faces too. So I'm totally happy for you to stay on camera and to see your reactions to some of the crazy things I'm going to say. And the first thing always for me is my life now flows with pure synchronicity, and I just pay attention to whatever's happening in the moment. So as people were joining, I was interested in the number of participants, which obviously was changing slightly. So I decided when Angie started to speak, that would be the number that I would check in on. And that number was 44. I'm not sure if anybody else noticed that. But when Angie started speaking, it was 44. And why that's wonderful, for two reasons. First of all, and I'm going to obviously be talking about the gene keys later, but just for now to say that the vocation in the profile for today is the 44th gene key. And so what this is giving us a very clear indicator is we are here to work together through the 44th gene key. And the highest expression of that gene key is synarchy, which is not a word that many people know. It's the opposite of anarchy. And so it's this absolutely crystal clear, pure energy connection that we have together as a team. In the Bible, it's talked about as the 144,000, and it's because there are 144,000 fractal lines that govern all of humanity. So we have a responsibility through this gathering tonight to come into this absolutely beautiful, harmonious synarchy as a team of, now it's 49, we're edging up. Oh, we're now 49, which is the gene key of the day today. So there we are. We've got the connection between the 44 and the 49, the vocation in the profile and the life's work in the profile. So I'm going to explain all of that to you later. But just know that we are in this very, very closely aligned frequency. We are soul family. We have come together in this moment to do this work together as a team. And Richard Rudd would say the 44th gene key is the key gene key, because no one can stop us doing our inner work. The only reason we don't do our inner work is through fear. So when we transcend fear, we will do our inner work and it will come to this wonderful completion and conclusion through the 49th gene key that I'm going to talk about later. So congratulations for being here, for coming together in this sacred number of people so that we can do very significant work this evening. This is not just a chat. This is an energetic transmission. And at different times during the evening, some of you will feel that. You will feel something happen inside you that will be a shift. You may even start crying. Happens to me all the time in sessions. And just letting you know that something just touched your heart. Something just touched your soul at the deepest level of your being. So I'm just going to basically break down into two main sections. I'm going to talk first of all about who I am, because I've had a very interesting journey to this point in my life, and it's included some very profound spiritual aspects of it. And so I'll take us on that journey to begin with, and then I'll break and offer anyone who wants to ask questions about that aspect of spirituality that we've been talking about. And then I'll take a deeper dive into the whole gene key process. And then at the very end, if you want to ask any question about the gene keys, if you have your profile and you want to ask a specific question about one particular sphere, one gene key, one line, I'm totally happy to do that with everyone. Except, of course, I can't do a whole profile for one person, but I'm totally happy just to give you a bit of an insight into how it works, so you can all benefit from hearing one person's particular question. So let's begin with my story, which I was a regular England guy, a rugby player, chemistry teacher, just living a normal life. And I got led to Canada through my school rugby team, who came on tour to Calgary, the Rockies, Kelowna, Vancouver Island, and Victoria. And as a result of that trip, I got recruited back to St. Michael's University School in Victoria, University Prep School, boarding school, which had a phenomenal reputation in rugby. I didn't know that. And so I got recruited back to come and teach chemistry, coach rugby, but most importantly, to be responsible for all the boarding students in the school. And there were about 200 boarders from about 20 different countries, including all over Canada and North America. So my job was to make sure those 200 kids between the age of 13 and 18 were happy in their lives at the school, outside the classroom. And then what happened was I eventually became the senior school principal. So now my job expanded to be in charge of all the kids, the day students and the boarders, 500 kids, 50 teachers, and my job was just to keep everybody happy. It was the best job in the world because the kids were motivated, they wanted to do well, the teachers were motivated, and obviously stuff always happens with kids, which is great, and some of it was really challenging and some of it was wonderful. But what did happen, which changed my life, was that the so-called indigo children started seeking me out in my office because they knew that I knew spiritual things. So I'd get a little knock on the door and this student would come in and say, "Sir, can I have a chat?" And I say, "Sure, what's up?" And they'd say, "Well, I know weird things or weird things happen to me." And I just say, "Come and sit down, let's have a chat." And so what I learned over a period of time was the phenomenal experiences these kids had, way beyond what we would consider normal. And I'm talking about things like precognitive dreams, where they'd have a really very clear lucid dream, and then that event would actually happen in life, sometimes in their own lives and sometimes on a global scale. And it was awesome and it was scary because there was no direct message, there was no street sign, there was no time frame, there was no date. They just knew this and then it happened. What were they supposed to do with it? And so it went on, and I just had these incredible experiences. There was one young man who could see the blockages inside people's energy systems, and he saw it as a sort of a little chain link metallic substance inside them. And he used to do this funny little thing with his hands, and he'd pull these funny little faces to unravel those locks, to set them free. Another young woman came to see me and said, "Sir, one of my teachers is really struggling as a result of a past life experience in her life today. Do you think I should tell her?" And I said, "Well, it depends who it is," because some people are going to put the demonic sign up and others are going to be really grateful. So, and this young lady was in total integrity. She never told me who the teacher was. What she did do, because she was a smart lady, she was actually Japanese, she waited until after she'd graduated, and then she invited this teacher out for coffee. And then she told her and had a wonderful response. But probably the most spiritually gifted student I ever had was a young woman who had what's called synesthesia. And she had this synesthesia from a very young age, and she didn't know what it was. It's actually in the gene keys, amazingly, it's the 19th gene key. So this young lady, it was in the early spring, just a bit later than now, late February, the cherry blossoms were out in Victoria. She comes skipping into my office. She said, "Sir, this morning I heard the flowers open." And my first reaction could be, okay, let's go down to the Eric Martin Institute and put you inside, or, "Wow, isn't that amazing?" So I went, "Wow, isn't that amazing?" This same young woman, I lost contact with her, ended up in a painting class in Italy in her mid-20s in Florence. She still didn't know what this synesthesia was. She was having these experiences, but still didn't know. So she's doing this painting in this painting class, and she's doing the painting, and then suddenly shouts out in frustration, "Geez, this green just doesn't taste right." And all the other kids stop painting. So the professor comes over to her and he asks her some questions. He says, "You know, you have full-blown synesthesia. Some of the great Renaissance painters had it. And it changed her life in that moment, because now she knew what it was. She wasn't crazy, but also she'd been sitting in these lectures listening to these professors describe these paintings. And she's going, that's not it, because she could hear the celestial music of the painting. I lost contact with that young woman, and thank goodness I did a workshop in Calgary, and I did an evening free opening workshop to explain the Gene Keys. And there she was sitting at the back of the room. Couldn't believe it. So now she's probably in her mid to late 30s. She's had 4 kids, and we're back in contact with each other. And she's having these remarkable experiences across the realms and dimensions. And it's not straightforward. I can tell you, when she has a clairvoyant vision, it comes on every single sense. So she smells it, she sees it, she tastes it, she feels it. It can be pretty overwhelming. So it's one of these magnificent gifts of spirit when you can understand it. So as a result of all of these incredible experiences behind closed doors in my office, I made this crazy decision to leave the best job anybody could possibly have and to go and create schools for these kids. So I left. Everybody thought I'd lost the plot completely. And then what I was planning to do just fell apart. It didn't happen. So now I'm without a job and without a home. And I'm saying to myself, okay, now what? What am I supposed to be doing? What was this all about? And the first thing that happened was I started to, and I didn't plan this at all, it came to me. I started helping people cross over when they died. And at the time I was working with 3 other people, 2 gifted spiritual psychic women, and a really close friend who had gone through a full near-death experience. And what we did was meditations around the bed of the dying person with their family members on quite a few occasions. And then when the person actually passed, what happened was this man that I was working with, who'd had this full near-death experience, he died for 20 minutes and came back. So he's a walking miracle himself. But because he died and came back, he knew the route across the void. So what happened was, when people died, he escorted them across. He went across with them to the other side and then came back. And the great news is, ladies and gentlemen, we had to stop doing it because he was getting so blissed out, he didn't want to come back. So I thought, well, I can't take you over there and leave you there. So we stopped doing that. But what this did was gave us a really clear understanding of the dying process and what actually happens. And what you need to know is there is nothing to be fearful of. It is a beautiful process. The judgment day isn't what we've been told that it is. The judgment day is simply a straightforward personal life review to see how I did. Where did I go well? Where did I not go quite so well? How did I impact other people in my life? And now let's have a bit of a rest. And then let's take on the next journey. Let's take on the next contract if I need to go back, if I want to go back. So it's nothing like what we've been told. And sadly, the committed religious people have the most difficult time because they believe if they've had any sin that they haven't dealt with in any way, they're going to be hammered in some way, go to hell. It doesn't exist for decent people. So we don't have to have any concern at all about that process. So I'm still out of a job and I'm doing 1 or 2 spiritual counseling sessions. And then the next thing that happens is through a wonderful series of synchronicities. And now I now know it's the only way to live our lives. I was now connected to a fully functioning medieval alchemist alive on the planet today, living in British Columbia, believe it or not. So now I get taken up to very close to Quesnel, Caribou country, and I meet this ornery, difficult alchemy guy. And to start with, he wouldn't even let me on his property. First of all, he had to determine that I was of the right stuff. And then he showed me all these alchemical treatises, which make absolutely no sense whatsoever to any normal person. And don't forget, I'm trained in chemistry. I'll give you an example. One of the most important recipe pieces in the whole process is the grey wolf devours the king. What the heck does that mean? Eventually, you work out that the grey wolf is the element called antimony, and the king is the gold. And in alchemy, you've got to transcend the metallic gold by dissolving it in antimony. It's the only substance that gold dissolves in, which then creates monatomic gold, which is now the philosophical gold. Alongside the philosophical gold, you have to create the feminine principle, which is not silver. There's a lot of trickster energy involved in all of this. And the other energy is not silver, it is mercury. It is quicksilver. And now you've got to create the philosophical mercury. So now you've got this philosophical gold on one hand, philosophical mercury on the other hand, and you need to combine them to create the Christ child in the cradle, as it's called, which is the beginning of the transmutation process of base metals into gold. Now I can tell you, here I am, I'm out at the furnace at 10 o'clock at night, minus 10 degrees Celsius in January, standing at this boiling furnace, 2000 degrees Celsius, with these boiling metals and minerals inside. And the alchemist says to me, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I said, "Well, I think so." He said, "Well, I need to tell you, only 4 things can happen, and 3 of them we die." Oh. He says, when you begin to do this process and you bring these metals together, then you give them their own consciousness. When they have their own consciousness, just like us, they want their freedom. So they will either jump out of the pot and plate us and we'll die. They will explode and we will die. They'll give off a poisonous gas, which is called the white ghost, and we will die. And the only thing that can happen where we live is if the metal's consciousness recognizes our consciousness. And then we can go into this co-creative process of the transmutation of the metals from lead, tin, and iron into gold, silver, platinum. Now, I knew nothing about alchemy when I arrived up in Caribou country and spent 5 hours with the alchemist at the furnace. But one of the things that is almost impossible to believe is that you give these metals their life. They now have DNA. They now have enzymes. They are living. And there is one reference in the Bible to this. The Song of Solomon, it seemed to be a bit of an erotic poem or song to be in the Bible. You think, why is that in the Bible? It doesn't make any sense. Well, it's because it is an allegorical story of this alchemical process. And one of the things they talk about in that Song of Solomon is the marrow of the metal. The marrow is living essence, living substance. So we've created this living entity to work with in this co-creative process. And I'll just tell you a couple of stories around that because it was just unbelievable and fascinating. First of all, under a microscope, you can see the DNA of the metal, so you know that it exists. Secondly, I'm just standing there as this process is unraveling, and the alchemist tells you nothing. You're just watching what's happening, standing by. And suddenly, there was this incredible smell. It was like the old English toffee apple, this rich, hot caramel smell. And I'm thinking, how can these boiling metals give off this magnificent fragrance? And the alchemist looks at me and he says, "The acorn's cracked." And I said, "Is that a good thing?" He said, "Oh, yes." And then later on, he calls me over to show me events taking place inside the pot. And so you've got all this boiling metallic substance in the pot. And he's got this great long iron rod, which he's turning in the pot. And I'm now looking down inside the pot. And it looks like these little fish are flowing towards that iron rod. And he said, the fish are fishing. And then I put 2 and 2 together to realize this was nuclear fission happening. Because to create gold, metals, and silver and platinum, you've got to increase the atomic number of those elements. So now we're in a radioactive atmosphere. I'd already had my kids by then, thank goodness. But I now know that very low levels of radioactivity are extremely beneficial to us. It's called hormesis. Natural radioactivity is required for this process to occur. And what's more, very low levels of radioactivity stimulate the mitochondria in our cells. So it's an amazing process to go through. Unfortunately, we had to stop because the crucibles of the time were no longer as strong as they used to be. And after 5 hours of firing this substance time and time again and letting it cool down and firing it again, the crucible holding it started to leak and you could see the metal running out. And then the alchemist said, well, this is now getting too dangerous. But we had already done the most challenging work, which was to create this Christ child in the cradle. That was the most challenging piece. So now what this did was gave me a profound understanding of the transmutation process in the mineral metal kingdom. So of course I went away and studied it and thought, my God, that guy knew exactly what he was doing, precisely. And what I also learned out, we were using the most dangerous method possible. It's called the dry method, and you speed everything up by doing it at this very high temperature. So I went back, crazy I am, I went back for a second shot because now I understood it a lot more. But the only defense you have is to drop into your heart space in love. There's nothing else you can do. Because I don't know what's going on from a mechanical, chemical perspective. All I do know is that there's something profound happening here. And all I can do is hold the highest frequency that I can in my heart. It was the ultimate test, if you like, of the quality of your own heart. So that was that piece. And then following that, the next most important piece involved was the work that we started doing with the land itself. And we started working with the ley line grids of the planet to some of the most important sacred sites on the planet and doing ceremony at those sacred sites. And then we had this wonderful synchronistic event. This was in 2010 when we discovered in Victoria what is called a landscape zodiac. And a landscape zodiac is the concept that the sun sign constellations in the night sky are imprinted on the land itself in particular formations reflecting those constellations. And so what we started doing in 2010 was going to each of these locations every month in that particular sign and spending a day with a group of people. So they were like pilgrimages every month. We'd look into the astrology connected to that site with whatever was happening energetically at that time. We'd take people on a journey through that land, and then we'd do ceremony at the end of the day to anchor in these energies. We did that for 3 consecutive years every month. So 36 minimum number of ceremonies and occasions. And then when we felt that was complete, we started linking in with other landscape zodiacs on the planet, specifically in Rennes-le-Château in France, Glastonbury in England, and an area in New Mexico. So then we started linking up these ley line grids to each other. And just so you know, this is really, really important. There is a book called The Keys of Enoch by J.J. Hurtak. And it's not an easy book to read. And unfortunately, it's very male patriarchal energy. But within that book, and it was a channel downloaded book, in that book, there are a few maps. And one of those maps shows these 13 sacred points on the planet all the way across the globe. And there is the central point is the Giza Plateau in Egypt. But then there's a second map, and on that second map, there is this magnificent descending dove over the whole of North America. And there are 5 locations that represent these 5 sacred points. And this shape is the descending dove coming down over the Americas. It's why my email is Descending Dove, actually. One of them is in Hawaii. Then there are 2 in America and 2 in Canada. The 2 in America are a place called Pueblos in Colorado and Louisville, Kentucky. And then when you look down at the descending dove coming down, the other 2 points are under the wings of the dove. And they are Vancouver Island and Nova Scotia. And when you look at those 2 provinces, well, Vancouver Island and Nova Scotia, you'll see they are pretty well a mirror image of each other. And amazingly, I have a wonderful group of gene key people in Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia. So I go out there and do work with the land there, as well as the work here on Vancouver Island. We also worked out the ley line grid that runs down the backbone of Vancouver Island. And that grid exits in the base chakra at Sachs Point in Victoria. And the crown chakra right at the top is Cape Scott. And I can quickly run through the chakras, I think. So the second chakra is Lake Cowichan, Honeymoon Bay. The solar plexus chakra is Sprout Lake, just outside Port Alberni. The heart chakra is in the Strathcona Mountains, and the highest point is the Golden Hind, 7,000 feet. It's like the axis mundi. It's the axis of the island. When you look at the island, it's 444 kilometers long and 111 kilometers wide. So it is itself a sacred geometrical structure. We led a pilgrimage with 21 people into the heart chakra of Vancouver Island, right on that total solar eclipse that was visible here 3 years ago. And we led this group of people and went through each of these chakra points up to the heart chakra. The one place I don't know very well, because I haven't been there, is the throat chakra, which is very close to Rugged Mountain, not far from Zabelos. The third eye is really the key location, which is Victoria Lake, just outside Port Alice, fairly remote area. And that is the actual point on the Keys of Enoch. And I see it as a sort of an umbrella all the way down over the island. And then you've got Cape Scott in the crown. So you've got this backbone that goes up and down the center of the island. And we've done this work both in the base and the crown. I've actually been amazingly to Cape Scott before I knew any of this. And you all, I'm sure many of you know that when we go to different locations on the planet, we don't always know why we're going. But we just know when we do go, that we've gone for a reason. And we don't find out that reason till later, if ever. So again, just being open to that deep and profound connection. What we do know now, which is really, really important to understand, is that all the stuff we're going through on the planet right now is not the answer. The answer is Mother Earth herself. She is going to make the transition into the 5th dimensional frequencies. Many of you will already know about the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance was a constant value, 7.8 hertz, since it was first measured in 1953. And then 2 years ago, it suddenly started to peak up to higher frequencies. And over the course of this last year, it has been unprecedented, off the charts at times. So much so that people measuring it say this can't be the Schumann resonance. It's too high. And then the instruments themselves blanked out. They couldn't measure it. So it's really, really important for all of you to know Mother Earth is going to make this decision, stepping into the higher frequencies. So we must connect deeply with her, particularly when you're feeling any sense of agitation or discombobulation or vertigo. You've got to get grounded and get out into nature and get with her and feel into her body and be connected by grounding yourself deep down in your body. There's a big misunderstanding about the ascension process. It's not about going up and out. It's about bringing more of your higher self down and in. And that's what we're doing in this process, is grounding ourselves in. But not only is she doing that, but the sun is also bringing through these phenomenally powerful energies through these solar flare ejections. So we are literally being compressed from above and from below. And so it's really, really important for us to be very kind and caring and loving to ourselves, giving ourselves time to rest and relax. I say Ava's drinking some water there. It's the perfect thing that you can be doing, is just to keep yourself hydrated, keep yourself fresh and balanced, resting, relaxing, and spending time in nature. And do not any longer overwork. That is old paradigm stuff that we were trained as children, try harder, do your best. And that's not the answer. The answer is to go with your natural flow in your own timing. So that's another big piece of the work that we did for another period of time, going through this landscape zodiac. And then the final piece I'll mention is that I had my own radio show for 5 years where I interviewed some of the top spiritual people on the planet. I did 250 interviews of these wonderful people. And so that gave me this very rich understanding of the truth of what this is really all about. But again, I got to the point of saturation, and I realized that it was getting way too mental, too much understanding. So I made another crazy decision to drop what was a really successful show. People from over 100 different countries used to tune in. And so one of the last interviews I did was of Richard Rudd. And he's a wonderful Englishman. And I did this interview with him. I didn't know anything about the Gene Keys. And I thought, wow, this is really neat. This is excellent. And so he gifted me the Gene Key book, The Golden Path, which is the process through the Gene Keys. And you just got your own free profile. And so now I'm thinking, this was back in 2014. I'm now thinking, wow, this is something I've really got to pay attention to. So I'm going to break off there, because that's going to be the sort of second half of the talk, is to talk about the Gene Key process and how fundamentally important it is for our stepping into these higher frequencies very, very safely. My whole career in spirituality has revolved around safe practice. So everybody feels that they're in control of themselves and that they are opening up their own journey at the rate at which they wish to. And the Gene Key provides this wonderful backdrop, this solid, grounded foundation from which we can grow. So I'll just pause there, Angie, and just see if there's any specific questions about anything I've talked about so far before we get into the Gene Keys.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Peter at this moment in time? Okay, I don't see any.
Samantha put her hand up.
Oh, okay, and I also see Shanti as well. Okay. Go ahead. Now, was
hi.
Shanti? Yeah, there you go.
Hi, thank you, Peter, for sharing all that. What a fascinating life you've lived.
Yeah, I know, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's awesome. I wanted to ask if you're still doing work with the ley lines. A few years ago, I had a reading with a guy, and he told me to do some work with the ley lines, and I didn't know anybody at the time. I didn't, so I'm just fascinated with what you're sharing about the ley lines.
Yeah. So yes, we do. We're not doing anything publicly at the moment, but we are very tuned into that landscape zodiac in Victoria. So we will go to different locations at different times during the year when we feel it's important. So we're not consistent, but just when we get that hit to go, we do. And we do ceremony in those different locations. So we are very tuned into that. But I should just mention, there's a wonderful dowser in England whose name is Rory Duff, and he does this dowsing of the ley lines, but he does it from a very specialized position, let's call it. And what he's discovered is that there are 4 times a year when all the ley line grids and vortexes on the planet come into resonance. So if you imagine all those structures across the planet just drop into this resonant frequency. And because he's an expert dowser, he can actually measure that resonance. And what he's found is fascinating. The first thing is that it actually happens on the eve of the solstices and equinoxes. Now, what's interesting about that is the old pagans, when they do their ceremonies on those dates, they would start at sundown on the day before and go through to sunset on the day off. So they obviously knew that was the case. Now, the other thing that was important was it used to be that that resonance would last for about half a day. And then this year, on the winter solstice just gone, that resonance lasted for 14 days. So what Rory Duff thinks is happening is that this is a cycle of time such that this resonant frequency is going to continue to build up until eventually it will last all year. So if you imagine all the ley line grids and vortexes on the planet coming into harmonic resonance, we will be experiencing that, and that's what's going to shift us into the higher realms. So it's definitely worth paying attention to the ley line grids and vortexes, and you can create them yourself. You don't have to go to Stonehenge or Avebury or Sedona. You can create one in your own backyard simply by setting a stone circle, doing some intentional work, working with natural phenomena like trees, you know, and you can create your own vortex through intention.
Been doing that with fire ceremony. I have a
great
friend who has a medicine wheel in her yard that we do
Perfect.
ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks
Wonderful.
for that. Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay.
Awesome. And we've got Sue next. Sue.
Hi, yes, Peter, fascinating. I'm absorbing this like a sponge, but you said something about Braine-le-Château, which really piqued my interest. You said France. My father lived in Braine-le-Château, but it was Belgium. Are there 2, or is it right on the border?
No, Braine-le-Château is in the south of France, the one I'm talking about anyway.
Oh, okay, I misheard then, south of France. Okay, thank you.
It's a very mystical place. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding it. And there was a priest called Saunière that suddenly came along a lot of money and rebuilt this chapel in honoring of Mary Magdalene. And there's a Tour de Magdala right on the cliff escarpment in Rennes-le-Château. There's a lot of magical, mystical energy around that spot. In fact, around that whole area in southern France, it connects into the Cathars and Montségur, which is another time, by the way, when people were, like we are, raising the frequency on the planet and got destroyed as a result through the only crusade led against its own people. Well, we're seeing that happening to us now, aren't we?
Thank you. Fascinating.
Yes, Marie, yes, Rennes-le-Château, exactly that spelling. You got it.
Do you have a question as well, Marie?
Yes, thank you. I've heard in the last year or so that the ley lines on the planet are shifting.
Yeah.
Is that?
So it's a bit like when you put the dimmer switch on the light, At different times, different vortexes step up and some step down. So some of them are being decommissioned, if you like, and others are coming up.
Okay.
And there are fresh ones being evolved at the same time as well. So it's not a static situation. In fact, I would say that places like Stonehenge and very sadly Roslin Chapel have lost a lot of their potency because they've become so commercialized.
Okay.
If you want to go to a sacred site in the UK, in my opinion, the place to go to is Avebury, because Avebury Stone Circle is in the little village, so they can't stop you. They can't stop you walking around the stones. It's part of the village, and you can lie against them, you can talk to them, you can have a wonderful interconnection with them. And there's a very, very obvious ley line that runs through. It's on the Michael Mary line, which is probably the most famous ley line in the world, and that runs right through Avebury.
Wow, great. And I was in the same context. They were saying that what we know as sacred sites, the most popular common ones, are also shifting, and that some of the newer ones are underwater, and we're not revealing their location because for now, because we're waiting for humanity to be at a level where they'll be respected or not
absolutely
taken hold of. Or
absolutely, yeah, we're going to see as this occurs, this raise up. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't know if any of you are aware of Oracle Girl.
Yes.
But Oracle Girl, back in the fall, over a year ago now, did a piece on purifying Canada. Okay. And in that purifying Canada, she actually said, and I couldn't believe this at the time, that the new, I've got the expression right here, the new Earth grid that is being activated is being administered through the waters of the Great Lakes of Canada. And I thought, well, how does that work? How does the water be the administrator of the new age? And then about a week ago, she did her latest update, and she said, can you see how it works now? Because in Canada, this energy is in the waters, and now the people are tuning into that and uprising and creating this freedom. And so, you know, we can't have limited vision of what this is really all about. So working with the waters of the planet, and in particular in Canada, really important. And then someone asked her, is it just in the Great Lakes? She said, no, it's in all the waters of Canada, the lakes, the streams, the oceans around. So connecting to the water element is really important.
Wow, thank you, thank you, thank you. Amazing information.
Thank you, Marie. We just have a question from the chat. We'll pop in here from Farah. What did the group participants do at each of the Vancouver Island chakra points? Was this a tuning and ritual to assist Gaia raising in that pivotal point to connect, or rather ignite to flower the grid forth at this specific sphere region?
Yeah, so we did a number of different things over a period of time. So the first round, we actually did a ceremony with a Lemurian seed crystal to connect all those sites together. And there is a central hub. So you've got these 12 zodiacal points around a central point. So we would use the Lemurian seed crystals in each of the locations around the whole system. And then the following year, we worked with the minerals associated with that particular sun sign. So then we would be planting another crystal or some substance that was connected to that particular sun sign. And of course, the tricky one was when you get to Gemini and the planetary lead is Mercury. So we actually had to find a way of working with Mercury. And I'm going to show it to you. So a little bit of gene keys. The 26th gene key is the energy of the trickster. It's Mercury as the sort of underpinning trickster energy. And I'm going to show it to you now. Richard calls this the Great Cinnabar Field. And here it is. This is a cinnabar orb. And cinnabar is the mercury ore, mercury sulfide. It is just as toxic as mercury metal. And here I am holding it. So how can I do that? It's because it's a trick. So what they do is they take a completely clear quartz orb. Can you see down the bottom here? There's a bit of a clear area. So this was a completely clear quartz orb. They spin it till it's molten, and then they inject the cinnabar inside, which is the pinky orange color. They keep spinning it until it cools down. So the outside is quartz, I can handle it, and the inside is cinnabar. And it's a toxin, so it homeopathically removes toxins from the body. And people love to hold this right down in their womb space and allow all the toxins in the body to flow out into it. And it's a living, conscious being. So you'll see it will even change in the amount of clearness or opaqueness inside as we work with it. This is like the alchemical process again. It's the mercury. It's magic. So this is how we actually resolved that with going into Gemini, was using cinnabar as our substance and burying that there. So we did all sorts of things. We also do fire ceremonies as well at different times. So we probably should press on shortly. And I think Tammy's got her hand up.
Okay, so yeah, let's hear from Tammy and then we'll move on.
Wow, this is also fascinating. So I have a question for you, and I don't know if it's directly related, but actually it's two. One is Ottawa key for ley lines? Ottawa itself?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I thought so. I'd heard that. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is that is there something going to happen within us where all our DNA is going to be activated and we're going to remember? We're going to remember, recall past lives.
It's already being activated, Tammy.
Okay.
That's why we are going through this time right now. We're already transforming from the inside out. And what is happening for people is different timelines are coming together in this now moment. So people are bleeding through experiences from previous lifetimes without knowing why they're having such a strong reaction. I had a good friend of mine went back into a past life situation where he was being pursued as an Essene in Jesus's time. Mm-hmm. And he's like a regular guy working his normal day job, and he's terrified and he can't think out why. There's no reason why, except he had this terrifying fear that these guys were out to get him. And it wasn't until he got through to understand this coming together of these past life circumstances coming into this now moment. Because essentially what we're having to do is to clear out everything that's happened in the past to set ourselves free to step into this new energy. We can't take any of this baggage with us.
That's fascinating, because that's what I've been feeling for like the last 5 years. Is like something will come up. I go, where did that come from? And yeah, like just overwhelming. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And I've just seen it. It's not the Book of Enoch, it's the Keys of Enoch. And I'll just put in the chat box the spelling of cinnabar. So it's called a cinnabar orb. Okay, so let's move on into the gene keys, if that's okay.
Wonderful.
Okay. Okay, so let's go back to Richard Rudd then. So as a young man, he was a poet and a literary scholar at Edinburgh University, writes beautifully and is a poet. And as a young man in his 20s, he was out and about actually on one of the main ley lines in England called the Ridgeway, which is one of the old trackways. And he was staying with a woman, and he suddenly went into this ecstatic experience. And what happened was he gets up in the morning and he is so full of life. And I think he would say he was in a state of ecstasy. He comes out of the bedroom, and he was just staying with a woman there. And he starts telling the woman about what's happening to him. And it triggers her into a totally angry state. And the more angry she got, the more ecstatic he became. Now, we understand that now, because when you look at the subtle bodies, if you're in your Buddhic body, then you automatically transmute any emotional triggers that people are carrying. So I'm sure you're aware of Amma, the hugging saint. Well, that's what she does. She wraps you up in the Buddha body and releases all of those lower frequency energies, just like the Cinnabar orb does. So with Richard, as this woman got more and more angry, he just wanted to become more and more blissful. So he thought, I've got to get out of here. So he left. And I wish it had all been filmed, because he was in this ecstatic state for 3 days. He went to a wedding, stayed in a hotel, went to a church where the whole church just burst out in light. And eventually he ended up renting a boat and going over to Bardsey Island, which is an island off the northwest coast of Wales. And it's called the Island of 10,000 Saints. And he's now sitting on top of this mound, and he has an experience with Merlin, the magician, on that mound. So he was in this state where he was completely connected with Source. Any question he asked, he got the answer immediately. So when he came back from that, it was really, really hard to come back into normal life. And if you've had that type of ecstatic experience, then it's very difficult to come back and live a mundane life, because nothing compares. Anyway, so he does recover. He's now getting more mature. He gets married, has his first child, and then he feels it coming on again. So he says to his wife, leave me alone. I'm going in my study. I'll come out when I'm ready. So he's in the study for 3 days and 3 nights, doesn't eat, doesn't sleep. And the whole gene key transmission came through him in those 3 days. It took him 7 years to put it into a form that we could work with. And what he was shown was creation took place through the 64 hexagrams of the Chinese I Ching. This was the way in which we grounded into form creation. And that those 64 hexagrams of the I Ching corresponded precisely with the 64 codons in our DNA. In other words, all of creation resides within us. So what the gene key process does, it enables us to unravel the truth of who we are, really, beyond all of the stuff that's happened in our lives to create all the challenges and blockages and lack of self-worth that prevent us from really going on our true mission in life. So then he brought out this gene key process. And then what happened with Richard and me was I did this interview with him, as I mentioned before. So now he comes to Vancouver, does his one-day workshop in Vancouver, goes to the airports, Vancouver airport, to fly to Portland, and the American border guards wouldn't let him into the country. The best decision they ever made. He goes back to his hotel room. He does his Portland 2-day workshop remotely in a hotel room online. He contacted me and said, I've had a bit of a drama. Can I come over? He cancelled his Bay workshop. So the next thing I know is I'm meeting him off the ferry coming into Victoria. Now, he'd already turned down the opportunity to teach at Hollyhock. But when he came through the Gulf Islands, he met me, came to my meditation group, he changed his mind. And that changed both of our lives in that moment. Because from that moment on, he fell in love with the Pacific Northwest. He came back to Hollyhock, did this wonderful 5-day retreat. We had about 12 people from Victoria there. And I thought that was the end of it. Great. And I got the book and I could go on my own journey. But then he sent me an email a couple of months later and he said, we'd like you to come to Romania to be part of our Venus sequence teachings, with the understanding that you'll take the teachings back to Canada, main facilitator of the Gene Keys in Canada. So I couldn't turn that down. And so I went to Romania, connected up again with Richard and other people there. And I then came back and I made an absolute commitment to make this my main focus in my life from that moment forward. That was back in 2015. And so I really committed myself to understanding the Gene Keys really, really well, and started doing these one-on-one, 1-hour sessions with people. And I did it initially by going on radio shows and talking about the Gene Keys, and then offering a 1-hour discounted session for people to join. And that's how all this began for me. And then we started doing workshops around Canada, occasionally in the UK and the States. And this whole journey began to build more and more and more. So what I'm going to do now is actually share my screen. And I'm going to bring up on the screen the profile for today. So the profile is calculated based upon the position of certain planets when you were born and 88 days before you were born. And you can create a profile for any date in history. So here we have, for today, Victoria, British Columbia, November the 9th, 2022, and I did it for noon today to take a look at what the particular Gene Keys were in the profile. Now you'll see around the outside edge are these little structures, these little hexagrams. This is the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. And just imagine the sun moves around every hexagram once a year. So today you'll see there the 49.3 at the top, and that means the sun was illuminating the 49th Gene Key today and on the 3rd line of the hexagram. So there are 6 lines in the hexagram, and they correspond to the chakras in the body. So the first line is the base chakra, 2nd line is the sacral, 3rd line solar plexus, 4th line heart, 5th line throat, 6th line both chakras in the head. And so there are 3 sequences within the profile. So I'll just talk about those sequences. The life's work, evolution, radiance and purpose, the outer 4 make up what's called the activation sequence. And these 4 are where we get our solid groundedness once we fully understand those 4 keys. The life's work and the evolution are you in the outer world. It's the way you demonstrate yourself out in the world. It includes your work. Whereas the radiance and purpose are the inner aspects of you. This is in your unconscious. This is the deeper level to access. But it's also where you get your core stability. So those 4 together comprise the activation sequence. And what we're wanting to do is to make sure we've got really clear alignment from the very bottom, the purpose at the bottom, the 23.5, right up through the center to the life's work at the top, the 49.3. Because the purpose at the bottom is your soul's purpose. It's what your soul wanted you to experience in this lifetime. And the life's work is the way in which you carry that out in the world of work. And so if those are not properly aligned, it's when we are living a life, and you see right in the center there, the 58.6, a life of dissatisfaction. So the shadow words are the bottom words, and these are the way in which we get stuck in old conditioned programs as a result of our inherited genetics and as a result of our life's experiences, any traumas that we have, any challenges we have that run programs in our life which prevent us from being fully happy and content in our lives. From there, you come up into the Venus sequence, which are the pink spheres. The first one you come to is the attraction sphere, And the attraction sphere is where you attract all those people into your life who are here to show you things you need to see about yourself. Some of those people have wonderful, kind, caring, loving relationships, and some are a challenge. So you look into the challenging ones to see what it is about this other person that triggers some reaction in us. So this is where we look into our primary relationships. And then we move back into our childhood development. The SQ, EQ, and the IQ represent the three phases of our developing childhood times. So the SQ is from the moment of your birth to the age of 7. It's your spiritual quotient, and it is the way in which you create a physical body in form through all the vibrational frequency you're exposed to in the womb and your early life experiences. And then at the age of 8, you move from the SQ into the EQ, which goes from age 8 to 14. And this is now your emotional body developing. So this is how we feel our way through our lives, how we interconnect with the people around us, and our emotional body developing. And then we move into the IQ, which is the intellectual quotient. This is now the age 15 to 21, when our mental body takes over. And now we are very much more involved, for example, in school and using our mental faculties, our intellectual capacities as we move through. So the idea is that if you've had good parenting and good life's experiences, at the age of 21, you then become a mature adult. If you have not had good parenting and you've had trauma in your life and dysfunctionality in your life, you will appear to be an adult at the age of 21, but you're still functioning as a child in certain aspects of your life. And so this is where we really get to unravel honestly and deeply what happened in our childhood, not blaming anybody, but getting a profound understanding of why things happened the way they did. And it's amazing how accurate it is. It blows me away every single day when I ask specific questions of people about what happened at certain times in their life and looking at those gene keys. Now, before I move on, I just want to make note of something for those people who have an interest in astrology. You'll see that the EQ and the IQ are both in the 38th gene key. The IQ is the position of Venus today. The EQ is the position of Mars today. So what this is telling you, because they're both in the 38th gene key, they are conjunct. They are sitting alongside each other. And we've got a really unusual situation with Mars and Venus. Normally, they come together every 2 years for about 10 days. And this year, they're going to be conjunct for 2 months. So this is the ideal time from now until the first week in March to really look deeply into your personal relationships with yourself internally, masculine and feminine, and the people in your life. And you'll notice that the 38th gene key, the shadow is struggle and the city is honor. So this is the position of the spiritual warrior. They are very honorable people, but they often get themselves into trouble because they will get into conflict with anything that isn't in a state of honor. So they often struggle through life because they're looking for fights. So if you've got the 38th gene key, you've got to recognize you're an honorable person. There's a strong desire to fight for the underdog, but you'll often get taken down rather than the underdog. So you've got to be careful what you choose to fight with. Just a little example of the way the keys work. So then we come back to that final gene key in the Venus sequence, which is the 44.4. And I've already talked about the 44 to a certain degree, and the fourth line, heart chakra. This gene key is the moment of your conception, when your parents conceived you and they imprinted in your DNA the sacred wound of the ancestors. And you made this crazy decision to come into this lifetime and to clear the wounds of your ancestors. And this gene key tells you precisely what that is. So, for example, the 44.4 is saying to you, if this was your birth chart, that there's something running through your family of origin which is to do with rejection, betrayal, and abandonment. And so you've come into this lifetime to heal that wound, and you heal that wound by softening the edges of your heart, by recognizing that if I'm whole and complete within myself, I can't actually be rejected. You can be disappointed and upset, but it's not going to rip a great hole in your heart. So this is the way in which you resolve the family wounding. It's the greatest gift you can offer your ancestors, so that when you are whole and complete within yourself, you're healing that rejection, betrayal, abandonment in the family lineage. And the 44th gene key is the shadow of interference, which means in addition to that rejection, betrayal, abandonment, there's also an interference pattern sewn into the DNA. It makes it inevitable you'll have some dysfunctionality with some members of your family bloodline. And your role is to clear that dysfunctionality out from your end only. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. So then that leads you out of the Venus sequence where we've done all the hard work. It's like a series of Russian dolls lifting off each layer. And there's always another layer below and another layer below. What we do know, though, is that when you do this work earnestly and honestly, it becomes more and more refined. So it's less of a challenge to resolve them, so long as you're prepared to face them. So then you've completed the second sequence. So now you come into the Pearl sequence, which are the 4 gene keys at the top. And this is now how you bring all of this learning about yourself back out into the world, and how you offer yourself in service out in the world. So now the vocation sphere goes from being the core wound to being what you're actually here to do in your world of work. And there's no doubt what that is. It's to offer your loving heart in service for the greater good. And you do it through having this crystal clear connection to everybody in your field. That then brings you into the culture, and the culture is the gene key that you now demonstrate how you do your work in the world. And so the 6th line of the culture, you'll see there, it says system. And the 6th line are the 2 chakras in the head. So this gives this person the vision of how systems do and don't work. So many of you who've been in the medical industry, the educational, the financial, even government, politics, you know what does and doesn't work. So this is the way in which we are going to create a system in the future that does work. Then you go back to the top, to the life's work. And I'm going to come back and talk about that in more detail later. But when you're in the Pearl sequence, the life's work now becomes the brand. So now you've gone around this whole journey, and now this is how you show the world who you truly are. And then the final step is the Pearl, and the Pearl is the final harvest, the final reward, the contentment for all the work that you've done to bring yourself to this point. And this is, how can I best serve? How can I best be of service in the world? Now, there's a big misunderstanding about service that I really want to cover, because a lot of people on a spiritual path think that to be of service requires some great grandiose vision, and it doesn't. It's simply asking you to do your own inner work. When you do your own inner work, you become an archetype of the whole thing opening up for the greater good of all. So don't think for a moment you've got to do anything even outside your house. You can do all of this work inside, but it will ripple out into the world. And that's where we are in the world today. And so that's the final step, the pearl. And the pearl, if you imagine this beautiful, shimmering, bright blue pearl, that pearl can only be a pearl because it's gone through the irritation of being inside the oyster and all the scratching and all the irritants, which eventually polishes it up to be this divine blue pearl to emerge, which is what you are. You are this pearl emerging from the oyster shell, from all the stuff you've dealt with in your life to lead you to this final outcome. So that's a very quick journey around the 3 sequences of the gene keys. But now I really want to focus in on just a few of these keys, because when Angie and I set this up, I had no idea at that time that the life's work was going to be the 49th gene key. And it is absolutely profound that it is, because the 49th gene key is the gene key of exactly what is happening in the world today. And when you read this book that Richard Rudd wrote, the Gene Keys book, he wrote this back in the early 2000s. And when you read some of the gene keys, it is precisely what is happening in the world today. It's absolutely remarkable. And the 49th gene key is one of those gene keys. So I want to talk about it. You'll notice it shows up twice in our profile. It shows up because the sun is illuminating it at the top, but it's also in the culture. Now, the culture and the pearl are based upon the position of Jupiter. So this is the connection to Jupiter, which has been dancing between Aquarius and Pisces for the last few months. So the 37th gene key is a Pisces gene key, and the 49th gene key is an Aquarius gene key. So we're now looking at this triangle, if you like, between the 2 49s and the 37. So let me talk about this 49th gene key. I'm going to give you a couple of quotes, actually, from the book, just to show you how profound this is. But before I do, I just need to give you a little bit more gene key background. So the 49 and the 4 in the Life's Work and Evolution are called programming partners, which mean they work together against you in the shadow, and they work together for you in the gift and the siddhi. But the gene keys also belong to something called a codon ring. And the codon ring is when they have a companion gene key with a similar function. So the 49 is in the same codon ring as the 55. The 55 is the gene key of the age of Aquarius. Some of you will know that just over a year ago, on the winter solstice, 13, 14 months ago, we had this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius. And the astrologers were saying this was the entry point to the age of Aquarius. And I do believe that it was. You've got to remember that these ages are 2,000 years. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time. And the reason I'm talking about this then is, think about this. The 55 is the entry point to the age of Aquarius, and it's in the same codon ring as the 49. And the two together are called the ring of the whirlwind. So what's happening right now is we are in the whirlwind. Everything is getting stirred up to be revealed for what it really is. And it can't be stopped. It has to happen. It must happen for us to be able to step into this new age. So this is what the 49th gene key says, just a couple of lines in Richard's book. The subheading is changing the world from the inside. the 49th gene key contains the sleeping genetic trigger for the process that begins our collective ascent to higher consciousness. This switch must be activated or we remain asleep. Now listen to this line in the shadow of the reaction of the 49th gene key. People see the outsider, that's us, as an inhuman threat to the status quo. And haven't we seen that happening all over the world? We are a threat to the sacred, to the status quo of staying asleep. And when I saw the truckers' convoy moving out of Vancouver on that first morning, I could feel the loving energy that was flowing with them. Somehow they've been activated into this place of awakening, of peace, of doing it on behalf of the people. Absolutely phenomenal. And so the 55th gene key is the way you do it on the inside. So the 55th gene key, the shadow, is victimhood. So now it becomes critical that none of us are any longer playing the role of victim. And you know when you are, whenever you are blaming, complaining, or comparing. We all do it, we're all human, but now we want to catch ourselves in these moments. Pause and step out of that victimhood. Because the gift and the city of the 55 are both freedom. Once you set yourself free from victimhood, you are free. Now, the gift of the 49 is revolution. So we are in the midst of a love revolution, bringing love in the heart to the surface, but not standing for these restrictions and limitations placed upon us by these external authorities. And that revolution goes round and round and round. There have been many revolutions in history. So that's a limited effect. So now then what we need to do is to step out of the revolution and into the spiral of evolution. And that is the city of rebirth. So this is the challenge that we all face. Homo sapiens, the species, is dying. We have got to let go of any attachment we have to the old us. Letting go of old habits, old beliefs, and stepping into a brand new frequency, which is both exciting and scary. And some people I know have actually felt their inner body dismantling, like literally falling apart, thinking that it's going to form a blob on the ground. And it's just your old structures dismantling and dissolving. And that's what the revolution does. The revolution dismantles and disembodies so that we can build the new one. So you take all of your life's experiences, you retain the wisdom that you've gained, and you let everything else go. And that's what's going to lead us into this new earth as we move through it. And Richard actually uses this expression in the city of rebirth. He talks about the forking of the species. Rebirth represents a huge leap in consciousness. It engenders a state of mystical divorce. This is the rebirth of freedom, or the freedom of rebirth. It is the 49th city that will rebuild our world after the 49th gift has begun to disassemble it. Human behavior patterns will shift dramatically. A new species is born out of the old species. And listen to this final line from the 49th gene key. We are the early flowerings of consciousness that occur to force the physical DNA to mutate, to accommodate the new future awareness. It's mind-blowing stuff. And then the third line with the 49 and the 4 is the solar plexus. It's the emotional center. And you'll see at the very top, it says line 3, changer. So what this means is that when you've gone through the changes that you needed to make, you are going to become an agent of change for others as they go through their change. And it requires humor. The third line loves to laugh. And then I'm going to talk about 2 more of the keys. The pearl, the 37th gene key, is the gene key of Christ consciousness. The 37th gene key is the age of Pisces. So the 37 is the age of Pisces, the 55 is the age of Aquarius. So they back onto each other. So the 37 was supposed to be Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ walking the earth as a divine, sacred union couple, anchoring Christ's consciousness into the planet. And the priesthood would not tolerate her. So they turned her into a whore and have suppressed the feminine ever since. This is the age of the divine feminine returning. The 37th gene key, you'll see the gift is equality. And it's saying to each of us, we need to tenderly step into the balance of our masculine and feminine within, and then hold that in our relationships. So the way I see this unfolding, and I've been engaged in it already, is the masculine energy's job, and its only job, is to hold a safe and sacred space for the feminine to do her work. And all the male energy has to do is let go of the need to control. It's easy, but sadly, many men are having difficulty doing it. But then also, the feminine principle has to step up into her full power and trust her intuitive knowing. And this is how we come to this wonderful, wonderful combination. And it reminds me, going back to the days of yore and the days of Avalon, where the most important quality was chivalry. So the priestesses would know what needed to be done. They'd drop their handkerchief on the ground, and Knight would come along and scoop it up with his lance and go and do her bidding. That's what we need to return to, where the masculine energy honors the feminine and carries out her intuitive knowing of the truth. And that's the final step for the gene key of the day today. So it's a wonderful image to have for that. And then I'm just going to talk about one of my favorite gene keys, because it's the alchemical gene key, and it's the one at the very bottom, the 23rd. The 23rd shadow is complexity. And so it is saying to you, whatever you're doing in your inner world, do not overcomplicate things. You'll make things worse than they were before. Keep things as simple as you possibly can. And Richard talks about focusing on 3 things only. 1, you do have to have your practical day-to-day needs met. Then what do you find beautiful? And then what do you find inspiring? And let everything else go. And just focus on those 3 things. And when you simplify your life in that way, it leads to this wonderful, wonderful word called quintessence. Quintessence is the mysterious 5th element. It's the element beyond the earth, air, fire, water. It's the mystery. And so what you're doing in this journey with the 23rd at the very bottom is your soul is asking you to dig deep, to distill out the most beautiful, refined elements of your true divine nature. And then you're going to bring that up and out and bring it out through that 49th gene key of rebirth. So you're going to rebirth yourself out in the world as this divine being that you are. And nothing, no thing is going to hold you back. So that's a very quick dance around the profile. And when I'm engaged with people one-on-one, then we work with their own specific profile, their gene keys and their lines to go through their whole life to bring them to this place of deep realization and understanding. And the beautiful thing is, as I said at the beginning, it's an energetic transmission. So it's not just a discussion about your gene keys, it will trigger awarenesses deep within you. Now, I haven't talked about every single key here because I wanted to leave some time for specific questions about the gene keys. If there are people having their profile, I am prepared to answer one question from your profile, a gene key and a line, and which sphere they're in, just to give you a quick insight in a couple of minutes of what that means. So I'll hand the ball back to you, Angie, to see what questions there are, if any.
Okay, fabulous. This is amazing. Does anybody have any specific gene key questions? If you have a profile, and also Ashley had a question that she had from earlier. So I wonder if we can just, Ashley, would you like to ask your question now?
Thank you, but what Peter was saying, we've kind of gone past that question now.
Okay, was it answered through everything that was talked about?
No, it was on a subject about the ley lines, and I just wanted to ask him a question.
That's okay, Ashley, you can ask it, that's fine.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask you if you knew about the islands of Hawaii, that they represent the chakras too, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and very much a Lemurian center.
Yeah.
So again, the return to that divine feminine energy of Lemuria. Mm-hmm. So I see the whole of that Lemurian continent from the Hawaiian Islands coming right up to the Rocky Mountains. So where we live on the West Coast, we are part of Lemuria. So this is definitely the area which is returning to that divine feminine. And there are some very special locations in Hawaii. Mount Haleakala is the one that springs to mind immediately. And I did ceremony there again on a rising sun. Just beautiful.
Yeah, I've been there. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Shirley, you've got a question.
Hi, Peter, and everyone. This is just absolutely mind-blowing, and it seems like what you're describing is what my journey's been. So, and it kind of started like 12 years ago, from Victoria to Sedona to Bali, to having to go through a lot of this stuff. And I feel like I'm working a lot of my ancestral stuff to breaking some of the cycles and stuff like that. And now I feel that, like, I know that my kids are sort of, I think, is there any way, is there anything that we can do that will hurry the process, I guess? It's kind of a silly thing. Or I just know that they have to have their own experience.
That's right, yeah. Well, first of all, as we're still talking about ley lines and vortexes, there are two great ley lines that run across the planet, the rainbow serpent and the plumed serpent. And they only cross in two locations on the planet. And one of those locations is Lake Titicaca in South America, and the other one is Bali. So when you were in Bali, you were connecting to the major great circles across the planet, the masculine and feminine lines. Okay. And clearly Sedona is another one of those places that carries several major vortex energies. and Victoria too. They're very different energies, all three, but they're all very significant. But coming to your other question, one of the things that I do, not usually a first session, but if I've had a session with someone, we will occasionally come back to that person and do a family constellation set of profiles. So looking at the children and the grandchildren, sometimes the husband, to see how the profiles fit together. And as you say, Shirley, there is no way to speed the process up except for you to do your inner work.
Okay.
Whenever we're looking at concerns with our kids, we need to look inside ourselves. And you're absolutely right. They do have to go on their own journey. But for example, if we work through the core wound, they don't have to. So we can save them a lot of work by doing the work ourselves.
Oh, interesting. And just one more thing. When I went to see one of these healers in Bali, and he was surprised at my birth, that something that I had carried of my mother's.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
was that what he meant, is that there was unfinished stuff there?
Yeah. So the 57th gene key is the gene key, which is when you are in your mother's womb.
Okay.
So whatever state she's in when you're in her womb, you pick up those fear vibrations that she's carrying. So not only do you pick up a genetic piece from your mother, you also pick up the fear vibrations that she's carrying when you're in the womb. And what that can do is make you ultra sensitive to the collective fear vibration on the planet. So then you've got to be really, really clear about what's yours and what's everybody else's.
Because then I could be passing that to my kids.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
But then it can all be healed. It can all be healed. That's the beauty of this. We can
agree.
stay out of time and we can heal it all.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, Gordon has a question.
Yes, I'm super interested. It's a fantastic, you're doing a great service here, Peter. I feel like I can see my life through this. It's all my life I've felt I was on this earth for a reason, and that's just a strong, strong feeling. And I've had people tell me, I used to be a tour guide, and I'd get people from Australia who were healers, and they'd say, do you realize that you could be a healer? And also I've come in touch with people that have said, I've got a spirit guide, and they've described him. And when you mentioned Grey Wolf, that just blew, I mean, that's my spirit guide, is Grey Wolf. I know this is a small thing, but I feel there's something there, and that I have something to give the earth, but I don't know what.
So Gordon, you've just got to relax into knowing who you truly are and just let it flow out, and you'll be shown.
Yeah.
But that Grey Wolf, it's very powerful energy. It's the teacher.
Oh.
And it's also about working together as a team.
Right.
And it is a big part of it's a big part of the alchemy. It's the only element that can dissolve the gold.
Right. I'll work on that. Thank you.
So you are a noble man, my friend.
Oh, thanks.
It's awesome. Now, Terry has a question in the chat. She says, hi, Peter. My life work key is 64.3. Can you speak to that, please? 64.3, did you say, Angie? Yes. Yeah, okay. So the 64th key is the final key of all. And the shadow is confusion. And that confusion usually means, should I toe the party line or should I be the rebel? And so in terms of this life's work, what you're wanting to be is the clever rebel. So you're wanting to live your life according to your own beliefs, your own values, and wrapped up in that 64th gene key is a very rich imagination. That is the gift of the 64. So very, very important for you to have a very strong creative expression. Richard would say in the 64, you know, you'll see this magnificent painting, but it's got a bit of a dark side to it.
So people with the 64 will often use their gift of creativity and imagination to work out their shadows. So they start off painting demons and end up painting angels. So that's the 64, the way in which we clear out those shadow frequencies. But also the city is illumination. And so it becomes very, very important to work with the light. And the way I like to look at the 64th gene key illumination is lighting up your inner landscape, bringing light into all the dark corners. And there has been a shift in the nature of the light around us. It's behaving more like a plasma. It's got a richer, more tangible feel. And there are some phenomenon coming out on photographs of different light structures. So again, really important to pay attention to. This is true for all of us, but it's particularly true in the 64th gene key. And I'll just mention the programming partner is the 63, the shadow of self-doubt. And it's important for all of us to realize that we all have doubt at different times in our lives. And it's important to acknowledge and accept the doubt and not let it stop us doing things. But it is an important aspect of life.
Thank you, Peter. That was spot on.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, Marie has her hand up. Marie.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. This is amazing. I've done the first 4. You know, I've looked into the first 4. I forget the name of that. The first.
The activation sequence.
Activation, yeah. I'm curious as to the pearl, which would be the I guess it would be the pearl. Basically, my purpose. Well, you were saying, how can I be of service for the pearl?
Right.
Mine is in 62.3.
So you've got 62.3 in your pearl.
Yes.
Right. So the first thing to note with the line 3 pearl is it's a celebration.
Right.
Your life is going to be a celebration. So start celebrating tonight. And know that whatever happens next is meant to happen to show you something you need to see about yourself. So from now on, we celebrate everything that happens because it's taking us to that higher frequency.
Right.
And I had a really unusual major trigger a couple of weeks ago, and I got really annoyed with myself because that doesn't happen to me, right? But it did. And so I got annoyed for a while, and then I realized this was a very deep piece of me that needed to be worked out.
Right.
So in the end, you become grateful for that moment, which doesn't feel very nice at the time.
It's seeing the mirrors, right?
Yes, and that's the line. That's the line 3.
Yeah.
So the other side of this coin for you, Marie, is the 62nd gene key. Is you've got to stop trying to understand everything.
Aha. Yes.
The 62 is too focused on the left brain.
Okay.
It's too intellectual.
Right.
And it can block off your intuitive knowing.
Okay. It's the part of the Aquarius.
Yeah, that's right. It is. Yeah.
And then the higher.
That very mental desire to know. Yeah.
Right.
So in this gene key, there's a very wonderful, profound gift, which is light language.
Ooh.
Have you listened to light language?
Yes, I know it.
Do you speak it?
I don't speak it, no. I haven't.
Okay, so let's talk.
I should say.
Right. So let's talk about light language for everybody for a moment, because it's in the 62nd gene key. It's one of the oracles, but it's the oracle of not saying any words that make sense. So it's just about making sounds. But some people, when they're hearing these sounds, actually see geometry associated with those sounds. So it's not possible to understand it. You just have to embrace it.
Right.
People that speak it believe it comes from their home star system. So you don't necessarily relate to all of it, but there will be some of it that you'll just feel this resonant connection. So listening to light language, or even letting yourself rip and just do it, is something that's worth considering.
Interesting. Okay, I am a singer, and
oh, well, there you are.
a singer-songwriter, and the last songs I've written have very few words, and I've been struggling with words. I feel like I just want to be in the energy of the sound.
Yeah.
The words seem to get in the way a lot of, unless so interesting that you should bring this up.
That's exactly right. You got it.
I'm finding my way towards it, I guess.
That's right. Exactly.
Interesting. Thank you. Wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks, Marie. So Carol has a question in the chat as well about a gene key. Can you talk about vocation or wound 15.3?
Yeah, so the vocation core wound, the line 3 core wound is shame. So the frequency running through the family wounding is shame. And somewhat unfortunately, I've noticed that a lot of religiously backed families have this line 3 shame. So if you're looking at fundamental Christians or Catholics, then there's this belief in sin. So they avoid showing any sin at all costs. So there are usually skeletons in the closet that no one knows about. And the kids are terrified that the truth is going to come out. So that's the shadow of the line 3. And the antidote to it is humor. It's lightening everything up and seeing the great cosmic joke that it is. And the 15th gene key is that gene key connected to the Schumann resonance and Mother Earth. So in this particular situation, it's very, very important for you to spend time out in nature and not move off before the miracle happens. Because the 15th gene key shadow of dullness means that you're not here for mundane reasons. So there is a tendency to want to get the job done as fast as possible or avoid doing it. But when you're out in nature, it's really important to stay as long as it takes. So you want to have open-ended time. And I have this 15th gene key, and it's really weird that I know all of this, but I'll be sitting in a beautiful, relaxing spot in nature, and I still feel the urge to go and do something, this driving force inside. And it's crazy. But I found that when I do stay and I sit long enough, then wonderful things happen, because the gift is magnetism. So nature starts showing up and doing what beautiful things and dancing with you, the birds, the animals, the plants, the trees, the forest. And so for you to deeply connect with Mother Earth and spending time with her is really, really important. And this is the gene key of the summer solstice. So the city word is fluorescence. So this means this is your inner flowering. As the sun reaches its highest point in the sky, so you also reach your zenith. So I would suggest you consider building yourself in your spiritual life towards the summer solstice this summer, and really bring yourself out in your inner and outer flowering.
Okay, wonderful. Vivian, you've got a question.
I do. Peter, I'm Australian, and years ago I actually climbed Ayers Rock, Uluru.
Yeah.
And within a couple of days after that, they closed Ayers Rock and said nobody was to climb it. And I wondered why. And I'm just wondering, does Ayers Rock or Uluru have any place in your work?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yeah. And again, stopping people climbing on it, again, was another way of attempting to block the connection between humanity and Mother Earth. And there was a major ceremony that took place at Uluru on the winter solstice a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So yes, it is one of the main vortex sites on the planet without any shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
And it is the grandmothers, the Aboriginal grandmothers, who are working most closely with it.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. How are you doing, Peter? Was there something you wanted to finish up with, or should we continue?
Well, yeah, I'll just finish up by saying it is an absolute miracle that we are alive on the planet today, through all the lifetimes we've lived over history, that we would all come together at this so critical time on the planet. And I know that you guys know that there's a very deep, dark agenda trying to play out at this time. And it's not going to be successful because the people are stepping up and will not allow it to be. So I really want to honor you for being part of a group that is committed to this, and just absolutely know and trust that it is unstoppable. Nothing can stop it. And whatever the other side try to do is going to be countered by the good hearts of the regular people on the planet, all over the world. So congratulations for managing to find yourself on the planet at this time with this group of people. Somehow it's an absolute wonderful miracle. So congratulations to you all.
Awesome. Peter, if you want to stop sharing your screen.
Yes, certainly.
We'll get everybody back on the screen. Awesome. There we go. And I just want to thank you so much, Peter. That was fabulous. And yeah, we're very fortunate to have you tonight. I'm sure I speak to everyone, but I'm going to invite everyone right now to unmute and send Peter some love, and we'll all say good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was great.
Bye.
Touch with Peter.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
How can we get in touch with Peter?
Thank you, Peter.
Thank
you, Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you get in touch with me just through my email, Descending Dove. Can you post that somewhere, Angie?
Sure can. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just send me an email and we can go from there.
Thank you.
Okay. Bless you all.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
Take care.
Peter.
Good night.
Peter, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, didn't quite get that in time.
Angie?
Yes.
How do I get this recording? I really need to listen to it again.
Yes, it's going to go to editing, and then it will go up on our, now we're putting recordings up on our Rumble page.
And how do I find that?
It has a Rumble page. So, but I will put out an email to people to let them know.
Great.
We'll post when it's available.
Yeah.
So just, yeah, watch for that.
It'll be a few weeks.
Save the chat. If anybody wants to save the chat, just for any little notes and things that were popped in the chat, just remember you can click the chat and there's 3 little dots on the right. If you click on that and click save the chat, it'll save it to your computer. Sometimes that's a nice thing to do in case there was things people were sharing.
Oh, thanks, Peter.
Yep. Okay. Bless you all. Good night now.
Good night.